Welcome to Movie and a Beer, everybody. This is Dan bringing us in, and we have our wonderful 3 co-hosts and friends with us today to talk about a really wonderful film.
A wonderful film. Dear listener, this is Aaron. I'm your St. Helen of the Blessed Shroud expert.
This is Blake speaking. I'm your cop car expert.
Heidi ho, everyone. This is Brian, your Cab Calloway expert.
Hey, and all these things are related through the guise of a wonderful film, as mentioned, called...
The Blues Brothers.
Yes, 1980s. And for you youngins out there, there's the show called Saturday Night Live.
It's still around, but it used to be more fun.
Around. It used to be more fun.
It was more important
And there's a couple of really famous actors or comedians that were on it in the early 80s by the name of John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, who had this skit they developed called The Blues Brothers.
It was like a personas or characters they played and then performed on the show. I should look more into it, but I've always been fascinated with the idea of, we got. I guess it's the first SNL movie.
Yeah,
technically.
Oh, but it wasn't like SNL.
No,
like, official.
Yeah, correct.
It was one of the first spin-offs that became a movie.
The original script was written by Dan Aykroyd. Didn't have a beginning, middle, or end or anything.
Love it.
So if you have seen this movie and it's been a long time, totally suggest revisiting it because it stands up. It's hilarious.
And it also showcases and revisits some great musical performances.
Agreed.
Oh, yeah. A lot of musicians.
Beautiful rhythm and blues songs.
And most of them got kind of a reboot from this movie in the early 80s.
The Blues Brothers, one of them gets out of jail. And
it was Joliet Jake.
Jake.
Just spoiler, he's named Joliet because that's where the prison was.
Joliet
Jake.
He's just known by Jake.
Out in Illinois, Joliet, Illinois.
Elwood is the other one.
The one who eats dry toast.
Yes, dry toast. So we want 4 fried chickens and a Coke.
4 fried chickens and a Coke?
Yep. So he gets out of jail. And they have to go visit the Penguin, who's the Reverend Mother who runs the orphanage.
I think her name is actually like Sister Stigmata.
Something weird. She looks like a penguin. She's big and very brooding, and the visuals,
she wields a yardstick with a brutal hand.
She does. Yeah. She breaks it on them. She smacks.
Well, I mean, they do keep taking the Lord's name in vain and swearing.
Yes, and they know better. Right, They know better, but they have to go see her to do penance and to find forgiveness for going to jail.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jake
does.
And she fills them in that they're going to get closed down by the tax assessment. The
tax assessor, county tax assessor,
They need $5,000 within
11 days.
11 days, or they'll be closed.
$5,000 in 1980 money.
Well, Aaron does that, Dan and I are going to speed through some of the plot.
Yeah.
Their plan is first to rob a bank, which he says no.
Yeah.
So they think, we'll get the band back together, which is a hero's journey of gathering the troops from disparate areas of Chicago, I guess, or all within the state of Illinois.
And on the way, they meet several musical personalities.
Yep, Cab Calloway, who's in the basement of the church, and they see him to get some inspiration, and he says, you need to go to this church.
And that church is James Brown is the preacher.
James Brown. So good. Some of the best church dancing I've ever seen. Aaron, do you have the numbers for us?
$19,996.
That's a lot of money.
That's not a lot of money for an orphanage, really.
Sure.
It really is.
And then after James Brown, who else do we see?
John Lee Hooker?
They see John Lee Hooker when they go to...
Ray Charles?
They meet Aretha Franklin going to get mad.
How long can I keep Blake on his back foot here by just naming more people?
Naming more people that are actually in it.
They go to get the guitarist, and they meet Aretha Franklin. They meet Ray Charles at a pawn shop.
Yep.
John Lee Hooker's there when they go to get the fried chickens and the Coke.
Yep.
They meet...
That was Aretha Franklin that was there. It was the fried chicken.
She's saying respect.
That was so good.
It's a good
I think you guys were saying her first film
debut, yeah.
And she looks so young in this film.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you should just watch this film again for that, to just kind of relive your heyday.
And here's the thing.
See a young Aretha
How old
Franklin.
is this movie? How old is the movie?
1980.
Almost 45 years old.
Almost 45 years old.
So it's old.
It's old.
From the standpoint of...
It is so fun to watch.
It is. And it's actually, in just doing a little bit of the research on this, so they get the band back together. They try to play a gig. It doesn't really work out. They have to run from the people that they ripped off at the gig. And then they convince the cops and everybody's chasing after them.
And the Nazis, Illinois Nazis.
Illinois Nazis and everybody for just random reasons of
and
them.
Carrie Fisher, which we found out later why she's hunting them.
Yeah,
that is a plot spoiler point we should leave for the listener.
I do. I usually say don't worry about spoilers. I'm going to leave that for the listener to watch.
But Carrie Fisher is great in this. Like,
phenomenal.
She the way that she has this kind of elan and this cool as she's like blowing stuff up. Like
she's like, I'm going to kill him.
She uses a quad rocket launcher, a flamethrower, an AK-47. I guess.
No, it was
and TNT,
M16,
and TNT.
Yep.
Just while also just perfectly painting her nails.
Yep.
Perfectly coiffed hair.
and it's that cool anger that you can see. It's burnt,
Yeah.
So this film has landed on the National Historic Registry because of it taking place in Chicago and a lot of different reasons. It captures the music, the environment. Truly, I mean, it really does. I mean, they did not stage stuff. They just went down
they
and
were
filmed.
they were driving on beaches. They were driving through the streets of Chicago. I recognize some from like The Dark Knight, which was filmed in Chicago. And I recognize, I remember seeing that.
I recognize some from being in Chicago.
Yeah.
I actually visited
me as well.
it, yes.
But I'll say the orphanage that they take place at, or that kind of film opens with, actually was never an orphanage. It was never associated with the church or anything. Actually, it was a closed brewery that they used and set up shop there. It's still a closed brewery. I guess you can find it on Google Maps. People evidently go there, but it's labeled as the St. Helen of the Blessed Shroud Blues Brothers Orphanage.
There you go.
I love that.
Yeah. So they play a gig and then they're running around the next day.
Just to pause for a second. This is a great segue to just mention the two beers we're going to be reviewing.
Yes,
Yeah,
we totally blew by those. So there's a couple of beer. We knew what we were going to watch ahead of time. And yesterday I took my poor good friend Blake here on a journey across Portland, seeking out at least one of these and then finding one and traveling across the river, across a bridge to find yet the beer that we're all laughing about at the table called Orange Whip.
It's upside down.
It is upset.
Brian pranked Aaron.
It's all about being pranked on this
prank,
show.
bro.
Death and Taxes was the first one, and we found that.
Wait, this one's mine.
Yeah, the one that has beer left in it, yes.
Okay. How dare you, sir? How dare you?
It's hilarious. So we went to Beer Mongers in Southeast off of 11th.
Terrific little spot. It feels like an East Coast location. I've been places like that back home, and it feels like, I'm back home.
Kind of just a neighborhoody tap room. They've got like 15 taps. They have a pretty decent cooler selection.
Great cooler selection.
And I had this beer before, and we're going to talk about it more later, but it's from a brewery that we have not highlighted or talked about yet, Moonlight Brewing Company. And then the second one we did is called Orange Whip. And so there's this brewery called Fortside here in Vancouver, and it's talking about the fort side of the river. That's why it's called Fortside.
Oh,
Well,
I never knew that.
There was a fort in Vancouver.
It's called Fort Vancouver, and it's
Famously.
actually still there.
Ah.
You can go walk
nice.
around it.
That makes
You can
sense.
see it from I-5 as you
It
drive
was
around.
the seat
yeah.
of the Oregon Territory
It
before
was.
the two states, Oregon and Washington, were
This
named.
isn't history in a
Correct.
beer. This is movie in a
Well,
beer.
famously, funny you mentioned Blake. Famously, it was a fur trading center.
Yes.
That, trading pelts out of the Northwest.
Yes.
Also nearby, when I learned my parents visited an airline landing strip,
Yeah.
like the
Lewis and Clark didn't fly in, man.
But they did.
What are you talking about?
that man
on their
lied
boat?
to me.
They flew in on their boat.
Boats of wings.
This beer
magical
we're drinking-
realism.
This
Oh,
beer-
we're gonna get into it, baby.
yeah. This beer we're drinking is called Orange Whip, and
Which is a reference to a John Candy line towards the end of the film.
yes, he plays an officer, and they're sitting down at the last big performance to raise all the money, and he sits down with some officers and says,
Who wants an orange whip? Orange whip? Orange whip? 3 orange whips.
Like a waiter comes up, asks they want a drink. He goes, points to each officer, waves his hand. Officer is stoic as John Candy's being this bubbly, usual, fun self.
"Yeah." And we're going to assume an Orange Whip is probably just a soda jerk kind of fountain-y drink.
Probably.
I had never heard of one before seeing it in a can, but the can has some great artwork, and we'll talk about these later. We're getting
Yes.
really into those before we need to. This movie, let me tell you, from the standpoint of music, allows the music to tell the story
It's so
because they
good.
use the songs
Right.
really effectively
Oh, yeah.
to help a fairly weak storyline. It is still a good storyline, but when the guys, they play their big concert, they sneak out, and it's just the big chase scene, big chase scene.
I would describe this as a musical comedy.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the music is so integral to what makes this film enjoyable. And I mean, yeah, there's the comedy carries it, but it would certainly be a very different film if they tried to play it without all of that music.
Oh yeah, the James Brown is the preacher doing the song. The lights shown on Jake to discover here's what the quest is. We have to get our band back together.
Yeah.
Right.
When they go to
Find the music.
when they go to the soul food restaurant and have to get their guitarist and I forget
Saxophone
player back. I imagine if it wasn't singing, it'd be Aretha Franklin just yelling at him like, "You can't be leaving. We have a restaurant to run." But baby, I got to get going. But it's this beautiful, you got to think song just happening. Yeah, every song really serves to move the story along. And it's so catchy. Such beautiful music.
The songs are kind of timeless though too. I mean, for
Right.
1980,
It is really fun to watch these performers that really kind of got forgotten about. To see them do their thing and really shine.
And you would think, okay, so this is kind of a comedy. You'd think that the band that they're getting together and they actually do perform once, and these guys are actual musicians.
They're
guys
phenomenal.
in the band,
Yeah.
they know actually how to play, and they're actually playing the songs.
I'm curious how many of them they
in the
met through the
performance.
Saturday Night Live band.
We've talked
Probably.
before about sometimes movies will have a close up on a character's face and then you cut away and you just see fingers on the piano and it's clear that actor is not. I think it
Playing
was
the
with
piano.
gosh, what was it? The drum
Whiplash.
movie?
Oh,
Whiplash. We were
Whiplash.
talking about that with Whiplash.
Yeah.
It's clear that there's a lot of musical talent present
On
in
that
this
stage.
movie.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
And they actually do perform. I mean, so at the big concert, I mean, Cab Calloway has to kick him off and not be an opening act, but he's
warming
he's-
up,
and,
like an MC.
And so there's this
he-
interesting thing
he's
that occurs.
vamping for the headliner
He
to
does.
arrive.
He's
They
holding
are
it off.
late.
They're running late, and he's like, "We got to pause the audience. We got to chill everybody out." And then something amazing happens. It cuts away from them, and then comes back to them. And what happens?
They're wearing beautiful. I don't know if there's a particular era for them, but
big
just
band.
beautiful
Big
tux,
band
be-
era.
beautiful
Like 30s,
tuxes.
30s era.
Cab Calloway is in his white tux, which is kind of what he was known, his standard in the Cotton Club 1930s, 1940s era. And he was Cab reborn. I mean, he also had that get up in some Betty Boop cartoons.
Oh,
the
nice.
Max Fleischer cartoons. Cab
never
had
knew
some
that. That's
cameos.
awesome.
Cab just shines. And, I actually got to see Cab perform a couple times.
Wow.
And he is an amazing artist. And this film kind of gave him a reboot. He was actually forgotten. Like he hadn't performed, and then after this movie, he went on the road again.
But blues in the 80s generally, because there was Buddy
Swing
Guy,
and jazz
Stevie Ray Vaughan.
were dead.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you got to remember, this is way before MTV. This is the era of radio, and whatever was played on the radio was bought in the stores. Right. So if you weren't played on the radio, your records didn't sell. You didn't make any money. You only made money on
blues and jazz. I think were very much like these niche things. You went to a blues joint or a jazz joint if you wanted to hear it.
And they kind of reference that in the film when they go to their agent in the steam room schwitzing, and he mentions guys, no one's listening to that anymore. If you want to wear blue jeans and I can't remember what the tops were. Pointing out you're wearing these black suits, black pants, black shirt. That's out now. No one's really doing that.
You're going to scare your audience away.
When they were going to do the recording of the songs and the soundtrack, Cab Calloway, when he showed up with the tapes, showed up with the most recent disco version of his song and not the original version of his song.
Wow.
And he had to go back and he didn't want to do the original version. He wanted to use the current style of music and do a disco version.
Which is so funny because the original is so good.
It is. I mean,
He was trying to reinvent himself and make himself relevant.
Yeah.
Understandable.
He had no idea that this film was going to kick off his career. He was trying to stay relevant, and
which is understandable.
Yeah.
It's really, again, if you have no reference as a young person to any of these musicians or artists, I mean, you've probably heard of Aretha Franklin. I mean, that's part of the American lexicon when you speak about musicians and language and what's out there.
And Ray Charles probably.
You've probably heard
partly from biopics, just people playing it. Like the Jamie Foxx movie is amazing.
So no, all of the major musical acts in this have subsequently, after this film came out, had biopics of them made. Each and every one of them. That's one of the... Thank you, IMDb, for a whole bunch of amazing trivia. This was, at the time that it was filmed, the most expensive film ever made at over $30 million.
Was part of it due to cop car destruction?
How many vehicles they destroyed, and then the renting of multiple the one of the end scenes when they drive back into Chicago and have to go pay the
Great
$5,000.
scene.
There were over 300 extras. They had like 3 or 4 emergency like vehicles, like real authentic. Like they went to the local fire district and said, "Hey, we need 3 of your vehicles. 'Cause
We need
we're
5 tanks.
We need 5 tanks. We need 7 or 8 Jeeps. We need 300 National Guard guys in their uniforms." And they just rented these people.
It's a big movie in several ways. I mean, there's a lot of crew. There's a lot of extras. It's also like 2.5 hours long.
Yeah.
It's a big movie and there's also like so many cameos. Like I think we were saying like Steven Spielberg was in here.
Frank Oz plays
Frank
the
Oz.
corrections officer who gives Jake back his gear.
Right. Yeah. And like those are just 2.
Twiggy.
There are several. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of cameos, and we recognize them as we were watching it because
Joe Cocker.
Right, Joe
we are of the age where we can recognize them. But if younger audience is going to have no idea who most of these people are, unless you're educated in film and or
I would love to watch this with a teenager and see if they recognize any of the credits scene when it starts saying the names and their part from the movie. Maybe Carrie Fisher.
Well,
But I think
They might know her.
they would genuinely enjoy the musical numbers.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these songs, some of these performances are timeless. These are your A-list musical guests.
Oh, yeah.
That were forgotten.
Yeah. And so again, like audience, who would be the audience for this today? Teenager, it would be young teenager because there's
No
only
sex,
one
no real
little
violence.
like there's a Playboy pinup on the wall that if
you're
look
looking for it,
you would
yeah.
see it. But that's the only kind of nudity in the whole film. There's
not much
little
of body count either.
No.
Like, people
No,
don't
no,
die.
no one really
No,
dies.
Every time they come out of the rubble or something, they're dusty, and then when the next cut scene happens, they're clean.
Actually,
So
that's part of the joke of how casual they are about like these accidents and shenanigans that they get into.
it just
That's
they
how things
ignore
are
it.
in Chicago.
But,
That's how it goes.
Yeah,
man.
it's cartoonish.
Oh, it's cartoonish.
is.
I will say
Cartoonish.
for the audience for this though, like just think about how like soul and blues and gospel influenced rock.
Oh,
and then
yeah,
rock,
yeah.
kind of became alternative, and then like EDM. Like there's anybody that I think is a music nerd is going to find something to really enjoy in this film, just to see kind of what were some of those earlier influences and how did they play out. And also too, like Ryan, you were saying, like blues had a big rebound in the 80s.
Yeah.
And maybe as a tail to this movie or an after effect, or maybe as part of the same wave that was renewing attention. But I think anybody that's interested in music is going to find a lot to like in this film.
It's a musically based movie. I mean, again, the music
Absolutely.
they're full songs. It's not like we're just going to play a couple of bars and that's it. No, they sing entire songs.
Oh, yeah.
The band, except for like when they go to the Roadhouse, which is actually on the trivia said it was on the back lot of the MGM Studios or something. It's like
That's fair.
It looks like California. It doesn't look like Chicago. But I digress.
Country Western was the other big
Country and
current.
Western. What music do you play here? Country
We
and
play both.
Western.
We play
Both
both.
kinds.
Yeah.
Both kinds, country and Western.
And they actually did play some country songs and,
Right.
and, Stand By Your Man and Rawhide. And
That's one of my
some
favorite
fun things.
scenes. And I was telling Brian about this. I love playing some music. I love music. I'm not naturally gifted at it, so I'm always impressed when I see like there's a scene that in that particular scene they start playing their old standards. Everyone's freaking out, like, no, we hate this. They go, oh, well, what can we play? Rawhide theme? And I think Donald Dunn says like A minor, good country key.
Yeah,
like
the country key.
The guys know enough about
country
music to
key.
go, oh, we know what the keys are. We know what the runs are. And then just
It's
start
basic. It's
just
so
knocking
basic,
out. Yeah, but I just never grappled it enough. So I find that really impressive. They go, oh, the key? Yeah, we can figure it out. Like,
Yeah, they
that's
just play
so
it.
good.
I mean, they've heard the song before.
The crowd goes with them.
Yeah. And the song and the crowd sings with them. And then
Yeah.
the other band shows up and you're like, it's like 2:30 in the morning and they're just showing up. It's like, no, man, they're closed. What? Yeah.
Good old boys.
It's hilarious. I was going to say, as part of, there's kind of this topic that occurs in this movie that has to do with the suspense of belief. We talked about this a lot in other
Yeah,
films
yeah.
where
I've
the
talked about
magic,
this
the
a lot,
movie magic, as we're air quoting movie magic, and it's actually within this film there are visual things that happen that I would call movie magic, but the characters
Physics?
they just assume things are going to happen the way they happen, and they happen. It's like a floating nun. It's like, what?
The physics of how a car can
Yes.
fly through the air, maybe?
Yes, that
Right.
too. All kinds of fun stuff.
I'd argue this is a term called, let me look up here, make sure I get it right, magic realism.
Yeah.
It's typically Brian. You were telling me more
Latin American.
Yeah, Latin American.
Yeah,
more,
so
typically like
certainly in the
Mexican
kind of
film.
early 90s, there was this
Yeah.
genre of film from Latin America called magical realism, where things would happen that don't obey the regular physics, but
Yeah.
it was just accepted as this is the way things are.
Yeah.
And kind of Blake is proposing that this has some elements of magical realism in it because
I mean, the definition from Wikipedia shows it paints a realistic view of the world while also adding magical elements, often blurring the lines between fantasy and reality. These guys, they obey the laws of physics. They run out of gas. They have to
keep going.
They have to. Well, no, they run out and find a way to get around it, but then they have to, pay their guys. Stuff is real, but then their car launches over a Nazi car after
Backwards.
reversing.
It flips backwards.
They that's shot at in a collapsing building, and then just walk and just shake off the dust from the bricks.
yeah,
just walk
so
away.
they explain it away by saying, "Hey, we're on a mission from God."
We
Yeah,
can't
they
fail.
they open up with he's looking out.
You see, we're on a mission from God.
Yeah, and they do continually use that as
It's
a way to
Elwood's
explain
key line. Yeah.
a way to explain away that's impossible.
their
That couldn't
amazing
have happened.
luck.
The very amazing luck. I wouldn't even call it luck.
They also
It's
use
just
it
like,
to
that's
convince other
impossible.
people. They tell Aretha Franklin, like we have to get the band back together. We're on a mission from God.
And she's
a
like,
lot.
"What?" And it really does turn out being that way because Cab Calloway kind of spills the beans. They don't tell the band that. He's like, "Well, yeah, you guys, they're going to be given their share of the any $5,000 to go to the orphanage or get shut down." And everyone in the band's like, "What?" They're actually
We thought we were going to get paid.
Yeah. Well, they thought they were going to get paid, but they're like, "Oh, this is legit. Like they're really doing this for a good reason."
Yeah, the band's full of good guys.
And they all
They
do
just
it.
follow
Arguably.
They just follow a maniac.
Well,
And
and,
Jake Elwood.
Okay,
Jake
when
Lewis.
when Cab goes from being a janitor to being Cab Calloway,
Yeah, that just
in an
instant.
instant he changes
The-
and he's
everyone-
suddenly big band.
Everyone does. They get the little
Yeah.
stands. They all
and
have
then,
tuxedos.
and then when the song is over,
it just wraps up.
They do another cut and they show it from the backside instead of the front side, and everyone's back to their normal
Right,
their normal clothing,
including
right?
Cab. He's
Yep,
no longer
yep.
in his white tux.
Yeah. So I mean,
He's
I think
the janitor again.
the use of that visual cues allows us to suspend the belief because you're like, oh
Yeah,
yeah, they're
yeah.
telling the story. It's imagination is part of. I'm gonna visualize the song and think how it was back then, and the whole. I mean, I like to go back to the scene, and the unfortunate thing is so the outside scene where they drive up and they have the street musicians playing to go to the diner.
yeah.
That whole block got torn down before they could shoot on the inside. So that's actually done on a soundstage. That's not actually done in the actual diner itself. That like when they had gone by, I mean, who knows how long it took, but that it was scheduled to be demolished, and that was kind of the going away street party.
Oh no,
That's why there was. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
that's kind of there's reason for people to.
We're
be out
talking
there.
about a space in the movie where John Lee Hooker is playing on the Maxwell Street Market, which was a big Chicago flea market in the early '80s.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a musical interlude where John Lee Hooker is the only musician in this film who's playing himself,
Right.
Which
Yeah.
is kind of fascinating, and it's kind of a farewell to a bygone era, which is that street, which is about to be gentrified and torn down.
Right. And the flea market being this place of community and connection where, people in that area would congregate and, listen to music and,
buy some weird statues, swap trade.
pillows, man. There
Yeah.
was some like
friendly heckle each other.
velour pillows that were
Have that one heckler I love so much where it's just, we're going to get out of there. No, you're not. No, you're not. Just mess with the guitarist. So fun.
There's a lot of really amazing footage. And we've talked about this in the last movie. We talked about True Romance that was filmed at a specific point in time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you get to see the
Specific
landscape.
location.
You get to see the landscape of the city, and that again doesn't happen. I mean, you said, "Hey, this was in the Batman movie," but it's not.
Yeah.
Only certain very small parts of it are like, "Hey,
Yeah,
we're doing
yeah.
this instead of on a soundstage or just all completely green screened." This is the real deal. There's no magic film magic in this at all, other than some minor explosions and the building collapsing.
Story
the
magic.
exploding
Story
building.
magic.
There's no CG in this, my friend.
No
No,
CG
no.
at all.
But I will say, part of this though is like I think it's very much set in Chicago. I don't think that this movie could have been really set anywhere else. Maybe New Orleans, but it'd be a different movie. But like Chicago has such a long history of the blues.
Oh, yeah.
Like the meatpacking industry, there were a lot of like African Americans that lived in Chicago. It
Southside,
has
maybe.
it has this distinct history and this musical scene that is unique.
It's a warmer energy than New York. Sure, Ghostbusters 2, they had the whole scene of, New York's all cranky, but now we're all banding together. It's still a cranky city.
New York didn't
but-
have the same blues scene.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. It's still also just, the vibe is just not the same.
Right.
Yeah, Chicago
Chicago-
has its own personality,
Yeah,
for sure.
Even though it's a huge city. It's one of the largest airport cities, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like the Loop is the big
Chicago O'Hare is the biggest airport.
It's a
in
huge
the
city,
US.
but this movie really makes it feel like everyone knows everyone. It's a nice little
Atlanta's gunning for
neighborhood.
him, though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's all
it is.
neighborhood. They go to neighborhoods.
Yeah,
And when
yeah,
they're
I love
going
it.
around announcing, like before they play the big show, they're just driving around through the
From
neighborhoods in
neighborhood
the
to
suburbs.
neighborhood.
With a
Yeah.
stolen speaker.
Right, a giant speaker.
I didn't catch that until this viewing.
But a $2 cover? Wow.
I mean,
That's
it's a-
amazing.
it's a nice spot.
Yeah.
I do like Brian mentioned that John Lee Hooker is the only musician playing himself, and I didn't realize that until today. Thinking, oh yeah, Aretha Franklin's playing a restaurant owner, Ray Charles is playing a pawn shop owner, James Brown's a preacher. Yeah, no one in this movie is really playing themselves except for John Lee Hooker.
This amazing singer.
Cleophilus James?
And-
What was his name?
Oh
Cleophilus?
boy, it was a fun name.
Cleophilus
It's a
James?
great name.
Yeah. And John Lee Hooker, I would argue, may have been the most forgotten of the musicals
He was earliest.
guests of this film. And he was definitely one of the, not the founder of the blues, but he was an early.
I mean, that song,
Proponent of the
I've
blues.
definitely
Early
heard that
innovator.
song as a youth pretty frequently. Like I remember the classic riff, bam, bam, down, bow, that classic riff.
But like Ray Charles, I think like he was in his heyday kind of in the 60s and 70s. Aretha Franklin was in her heyday in like the 60s. But John Lee Hooker was like a generation earlier.
Right, predates.
And, yeah.
he
I mean-
does kind of look it. He's
old.
Yeah, he was
He's
old,
like an old man.
in 1980. Yeah.
he still had it, baby.
Yeah, you could still sing.
Oh yeah, God, what a great movie! The music in this movie is so good.
From a cinematography standpoint, a lot of just wide shots, inside the buildings, there's some interesting, just standard, we got a camera here and a tripod and a camera, did they do 3 shot?
Yeah, pretty.
Angles for conversation and different angles while the same scene's happening.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say though, the scene when they go visit the nun, as soon as he's out of jail,
the light.
that is the lighting. We all mentioned this. We're like,
Aaron caught the
fit
lighting
right.
being the wrong way.
I think that was Dan.
Was it Dan?
Yeah, I
Oh,
think
that
it
was
Dan.
you.
Yeah,
Like,
all
what's
right.
up
So
with that?
there were shadows on the stairs up to go see the nun,
Yeah.
and they were
the penguin.
really interesting shadows, but they were clearly thrown by a light.
I like, yes.
It was running in the opposite way of the banister.
Right.
So a light, as in a lighting guy set it up, not part of the scene. Okay.
Somebody set up a light with bars over the light to throw all those straight parallel shadows that made the staircase look like a checkerboard.
Yeah.
So cool.
And just like,
That giant crucifix.
yeah, at the top.
Well, getting to your magical realism, Blake. Though, like when in this scene,
That's
they're
right,
about
the
to knock
nun.
on the door for the nun, and she knows somebody's there. She's
Door
like,
just-
"Who is it?"
Door
Well,
just
she
swings
heard him
open.
come up.
And
I
then
mean,
the door opens on its own. The door
shuts on
it
itself.
shuts on its own. And then after they're leaving, and she's admonishing them of like, "Don't do this or dishonest means and all that." She floats backwards.
yeah, she literally, and the door just closes.
and the door just closes.
It's my mom's favorite shot of the whole movie. It's just
Actually,
the penguin.
I think I agree with your mom. Like that's hilarious.
It's great.
Like yeah.
After she breaks a yardstick smacking these boys.
Yeah. So again, I think one of the ways that they utilize their history of doing SNL skits and doing
Yeah.
short bits, this film's broken into short.
It really
bits.
is.
very
It's
episodic.
very episodic.
Very episodic, and I think the way that they treat it in TV, and that it's like we can get away with that on TV because it's like whatever. And
It's,
so I think in a movie,
30,
they think
it's
they can
30
get
to
away.
40 minutes,
Yeah.
depending on how long the show is, of just collection of cuts
Skits.
leading up to a
And the magic part of it, I think, they're used to that stuff on SNL anyway. They were used to just stuff not really doing the way it's supposed to do it.
Nothing has
so-
to make sense.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask if anybody had seen the original SNL skits where they created these characters.
I don't know if I've seen the skits where they created. I watched when I got big into this movie and a lot of like 80s and 90s Chicago based films in college, and I found some YouTube clips of them like performing, but I never went and found the actual footage of them like making the characters.
I almost wish we watched that before
Yeah,
starting to record.
I will say that I'm fairly certain I haven't seen the very first rendition, but I had seen some of these skits up to here.
Okay.
So I'm old enough. I was like 11, 12, 13 when... Well, I was 12 when this movie was released, so I was 8, 9, 10, 11 when these characters were being developed.
So was it something where they were in sketches and then the sketches broke out into song, or they were part of the musical guest? And you notice, oh man, that's Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. That's crazy. They're playing music with them now.
There was definitely one time I remember the Blues Brothers band played as the musical guest.
That's cool.
But I also think that there was a sketch.
Yeah,
I remember.
because Belushi and Aykroyd were on the first season. I know Aykroyd was.
Yeah.
I think Belushi was on the first
Well,
season.
and they oh wait,
Well, SNL started way before 1980.
74, 75?
mid 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other movies that they made around this exact same era with a lot of the same cast, with a lot of the same people. So it's not surprising that they're utilizing probably people that they met on SNL.
Oh, probably.
Same writers. I mean, literally,
Mr. T is in this movie.
Mr. T's in the movie. The script was written by Dan Aykroyd and didn't have like a beginning, middle, and end. It was just like something he wrote.
Here's some stuff
for the
Sounds
for the
like
show.
an SNL skit.
Yeah, it's like it doesn't have. You don't have to really tell a story, and then it was taken on by a really, really good director who's like, hey,
John Landis, classic.
We can turn this into something interesting, and they did a really good job. There was a remake that was made of this, and
Well, I thought it was a sequel.
or maybe it was a sequel.
I never watched it. I saw
I,
parts and thought
there was
it's
a
okay.
Blues Brothers 2000.
Yeah.
But before we were watching, I was asking Brian a little bit about what was the context of comedy in 1980? Like, who else was big at that time? And I think we talked about Rodney Dangerfield,
Robin
Steve
Williams.
Martin.
Robin Williams.
Yeah, I think he was still doing stand up at the time.
When the
Steve
car
Martin.
in the mall
Maybe it was like
crashes,
Randy.
when the
Mark-
car
Mark and
crashes
Mindy?
when the car crashes into the record store in the mall, there is a big cardboard cutout of Robin Williams that's like promoting his comedy album that he had just
Nice.
released.
I didn't catch
and they're
that.
friends with him, so they're like, yeah, we'll put you in
I
it.
buy that.
Yeah, so
God, that mall chase scene was so good. There's a
It was
the fact there-
excessive. It was long.
it was part of that magical realism where they're like destroying this mall, no one's getting hit, and while they're driving through,
they're driving through the mall.
Yeah.
And-
demolishing everything.
and
Right.
and
the cops are following in, demolishing stuff too.
and Jake mentions. I always thought.
oh hey, there's an Orange Julius over there. They got
So I
one.
always thought it was Orange Julius. He references something else, but he says, "Yeah, I got this place." Oh, sure. Man, this mall has everything. And then just the big band music playing as they smash through more store. They're so casual about it. Oh man, this place has everything.
Well, it'd
Cool,
be
cool.
like exactly what you say if you were walking through the mall. It
Exactly.
was like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
humor is like as though they were just walking through the mall. It's the same conversation.
their lives are so chaotic. Like this is normal.
yeah.
A building fell on us. That's
Which
fine.
is
Let's go see
really
the penguin.
It is really
fail.
funny. Some of the gags in this, I would say, are kind of evergreen. They're timeless.
Yeah,
like
good broad comedy.
the sauna scene where it's like the two Blues Brothers are hashing out this deal with
their agent,
with
yeah.
an agent,
And it's shot extremely tight on
yep.
those three characters.
on those three characters, kind of back and forth. They're negotiating.
Mm-hmm.
They finally reach agreement after like a minute or two. And it's like, okay, guys, let's go. And it pans out, and you see like the whole band was just sitting
So,
there.
Sitting in the sauna room.
that was an
Yeah.
homage to an album cover that was put out by Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Really?
That was the actual album cover where it was just like the lead singer talking to like their agent,
Oh,
and the
that's
rest of the band
cool.
was sitting behind them. I
didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, again, wonderful trivia. Thank
you
you.
can tell these guys
I-
love and appreciate
music.
music. Like that's why I think that's why this movie works so well because there are comedies that have a lot of needle drops where it's oh man we got these new hit songs that are okay comedy, but this one's it's a pretty good comedy. It's classic standard 80s late 70s, early 80s comedy. But the music, the care and love for the music and the cameos and like people they have in it is so.
And even the background
earnest.
music
is
fantastic in this film.
I noticed like the elevator. They were playing the girl from Ipanema, like this,
Right? Yeah.
And it was like
which was the
perfect elevator music, but it's a genuine song.
It was also the first music we'd heard since the car chase started. Because I mentioned I kind of miss hearing some music, and the first thing we get is bum 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 bum. After all this,
and let's talk for just a second about the very first scene of the film in the prison.
Oh, yeah.
It's really the only scene that has no music at all.
Yes.
And once Joliet Jake is out of prison, suddenly here comes the music because that is what lights up his life.
Yeah.
Right.
So
brother Elwood.
here's a fun thing. Here's a fun fact.
Yes.
I mean, seriously,
Yeah,
look at
please
the
do.
trivia on this.
It's amazing.
This has some great
film,
trivia.
This film is one of the only films that has been endorsed by the Pope. The Catholic Church actually endorses this film as a good film for Catholics to see.
I love that.
30th anniversary, they came out and did that because it's like
Save the orphanage.
Save the orphanage. We're going to do the right thing to
They're on
save
a
it.
mission
Even
for
though,
God.
even though they do a lot of
Even though there are personal consequences.
That must have been John Paul. It couldn't be Ratzinger.
yeah, no.
No, it definitely wasn't.
So it would have been
Ratzinger's more of an Animal House man.
Yeah.
no, he was not.
I mean, that's the kind of crazy stuff that you can just learn all kinds of strange things about this movie.
This is a movie with heart, though. I suppose I can
Yeah.
understand
Yeah.
where the Pope was coming from, or where the papal endorsement was coming
Yeah.
from.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
It's a movie with heart. I think we were talking before about appropriate audiences of like I think kind of any age could
Frankly,
watch this.
I think. I mean, there's swearing, there's some smoking and drinking, but again, nothing's really.
but they get punished by a nun for it.
It's true. Well, they get punished early, and then later on, they drink that bar dry.
See the light.
When I had young nieces and nephews, I would have no problem watching with them.
Yeah.
They would dig the music.
Yeah, this movie stands up as a classic. It's in my top 10 for sure.
And there are some fun sight gags. I mean, they won't get everything, but it's fun. It's a fun movie.
And the Bluesmobile. That's a classic car right there.
the
one that they drove around in most of.
Yeah, the cop car.
1976 Dodge.
74, I think.
1974.
Yeah.
Was it 74? I thought it was 76.
I don't know.
It's 70 something. It had
I thought it was like just only 4 years.
it had,
but
had a cop engine, cop tires, cop shocks,
cop suspension.
cop
Yeah,
suspension.
it was a car they bought at police auction of an old cop car.
They were practically giving them away.
The stars like roughly
Faded.
scrubbed out on the door.
At some point, we thought it was brown because of how dusty and gross it was.
That was me. I made that
All
mistake.
right. Well, here's
I mean,
a fun.
it's understandable.
Here's a fun cameo. Who was the waiter in the restaurant scene?
I'll try to do a quieter version of it.
Yes.
There's no quiet version of that.
It's really difficult.
character.
Yes.
So sorry for that, Dan.
I think this was
Before-
Paul Rubens'
Wait,
first.
he was in the he was like Sweatman in what was the movie we watched?
Mystery Men?
Mystery
That
Men.
was 90s, dude, or 2000.
Was it 90s or
Yeah.
2000s?
It was much later.
But
Yeah.
he's
He
known
was the
for
spleen.
being the spleen. Thank you. But he's known for being like Pee Wee Herman.
Yeah.
But the spleen,
He's
I
also-
thought he was an excellent.
Oh, he was great in that. He was also one of Oswald Cobblepot's parents in Batman Returns. Also a small role. But at that point, I think he'd done Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which is a Tim Burton film, and Tim Burton did. I should just make my expertise movie trivia every time. But yeah, Paul Rubens was briefly in this. That restaurant
Steven Spielberg, I think.
Steven Spielberg was the county clerk, tax collector. The restaurant scene was hilarious. That was one of the recruitment, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Where they get the trumpet player and just get to be disgusting weirdos. Asking the guy, how much should I buy your women?
So all right. So we're going to talk about Orange Whip for a second here because
Yes.
there's a really, really good set of trivia on this. So John Candy improvised that. It was not in the script.
Really? I
Yes.
love that.
People
And
quote it all the time.
And they
It's
quote
a
it
great
all the
quote.
time. And it's because Orange Whips were used as refreshments for the set and crew and for everybody during the filming of that scene.
No way.
And so he's like, "Well, it's right there. Orange Whip. You want an Orange Whip? Orange Whip. Orange Whip." And so it's actually
what a
both.
great comedian.
It's an alcoholic cocktail, but you can also there's obviously non-alcoholic versions of it out there as well as a soda, and it's just like.
I think for that
Wow.
scene, it's funnier if it's alcoholic because those two cops were not having it. And he's
Yeah.
I'm having a good time. I'm getting my
He takes a sip.
my guy on parole's messed up. I can get my job done. Should be used as a good segue into the beers we had.
We can, unless you guys have anything else you want to bring up before we digress into more chat.
Like I'm
Aaron's
good.
looking at
I'm
his
happy.
phone.
I'm happy for what we talked about. But I'm
Yeah.
also open.
Well,
to
I was
talk about more.
wondering, kind of like the careers of the actors and actresses that were in this. Kind of what happened after, because I think John Candy went on to do several more movies.
A lot of movies.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
This
he
was
was
the beginning of his career.
I guess film career because he's on SCTV, right? Or am I thinking of the other Canadian?
Wasn't he also an
comedians?
SNL?
He was also
alum?
on SNL.
Was he on SNL?
Yes,
Because I know
he was,
SCTV
yeah.
was Rick Moranis, Dave Thomas, Edward, Eugene Levy. I could have sworn Candy was on there. Cool. That's awesome.
And Dan Aykroyd went on to Ghostbusters and many other things.
Oh, he's had a good long career, tailing down into vodka, I think.
yeah.
Yeah.
He's been in vodka.
He's a
selling
distiller now. Jim Belushi,
John?
John Belushi, thank you, would have had a big career after this.
Right.
Yeah.
However, he
He passed away.
He passed away
82,
early.
in '82.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But he had met Dan Aykroyd apparently doing a Second City Comedy Club work.
Yeah, Second City's out of Chicago, I think.
Yes, it
in
is.
Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah, big improv city. Yeah,
Right.
Chicago and New York were, I think, lead improv cities until Los Angeles kind of rose up and went, oh, we can have comedy.
One of the things is, so both of them were on SNL, and both of them left SNL at the end of the 1975 season. So this movie came out after they had left it, and there was a lot of question about, is this something they can pull off? So yeah, the bankrolling of it was questionable, even though it was like a $30 million, like the most expensive film made to date because of all of
it was
the
a
cars
big
crashed.
gamble.
Yeah,
Big,
a lot,
big
a
gamble.
lot of comedies don't get that kind of leeway, which is part of the appeal for filmmakers. You don't have to pay a lot for guys to riff on camera.
No.
Pretty low costs
And,
versus
and I
action
believe
movie.
it did make well more than that back.
Yes.
I'm glad to hear that.
oh, it was financially
I think it
successful.
was
That's
like 100,
fantastic.
180 million or something worldwide. Wow,
that's
a
amazing.
lot back then.
And then the DVD sales, when guys like me saw them, went, Oof, I'm going to pay $10 for this. Heck yeah.
There is a cult following for this movie. I think
I'd buy that.
There's kind of a devoted. I think, and I don't know if it's music nerds or if it's people of a certain age. Blake.
I think I think that Venn diagram's almost a circle. It's there's
Right.
people who appreciate music, who appreciate this movie, and there's
Yeah.
people who appreciate classic comedy, who see this and go, oh yeah, this is like it's almost a period piece. I mean, Dan said it was part of the National Registry. Like,
Yeah,
I'm glad
it's
for a great reason.
included in that now. Yeah, so gross worldwide after it was released is 115 mil, which is pretty good for 1980.
It's a great.
Well, blues are forever. Death and taxes are also forever.
Yes,
true.
they are. So this is the
I'm
time
singing the
of
blues over paying my taxes.
Yeah. So this is the time on the podcast we're going to switch over a little bit and talk about.
I'm glad you like that transition. I'm glad we all went with it.
We did, and so the first one, as we mentioned before, Death and Taxes is and I'm going to quote here, San Francisco style black beer.
So San Francisco style, they make a beer a particular way.
Well,
So
there's marketing
there's
copy that might tell us.
the copy. So I looked on their website because I read that and I was like, okay, I've never really heard of San Francisco having a specific black lager style, but they do. And it's one that has a little bit more coffee forward flavor, which this one does.
I associate San Francisco with like Anchor, like steam beer.
Yeah.
Kind of, I don't know. I'm sure there's plenty of other brewers and plenty of other styles that are represented at San
But
Francisco.
what's amazing is they have like the measurements. It's like,
Oh, that's
They have
cool.
like, this is 1/248th U.S. barrel or 473 milliliters or 1 U.S. pint or 16 fluid ounces. This ain't no factory beer.
I like
This is the original San Francisco style black lager, deceptively dark yet surprisingly light-bodied, drinkable, and perfectly refreshing and delicious.
Not brewed in San Francisco, but brewed in Santa Rosa, California.
Yeah.
I don't want to make Dan do extra work, but I was really tempted to do the just behind Aaron's copy read. But
I'm taking the can back.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
keep
I wanna
cold,
read it.
drink
I just-
fresh. And the can's got a moon on it because it's Moonlight Brewing Company. So I had this beer a while ago. Like one of the neighborhood wine shops closed and got reopened as Bar Salute Cherie, and the owner there has this in Tall Boys available. As one of the beers he can offer. And
Nice.
I had not had it before having it there. And I was like, wow, this is actually really good for just a dark lager. It's got enough coffee roast to it. It definitely, it's like completely black. There's a little bit of reddish hue to it if you did pour it into a glass. It's got a nice chocolate, dark coffee aroma. There was a lot of that in the same flavor profile. I think the nuttiness helped it carry. Even as it warmed up, it still had that nutty kind of roast to it, which is really nice. Even though it is like a lighter, medium-bodied lager. I mean, it's just a really nice light drinking beer, and it's only 5.3%. So, I mean, while yes, it's bigger than a lot of lagers, it's still a very, very clean, drinkable beer.
It's almost like a stout flavor profile
Yep.
transposed onto
Yeah.
a lager. It's a lighter body.
It's a lager version
Yeah.
of a stout, basically.
But there's
a
some of
light
that
stout.
coffee roast kind of flavor profile.
I kind of like that because I love a stout, but you get one and you're full, which I'm fine with. But I have to be aware when you're getting beers. If I have a stout, that's the beer for the afternoon.
Yeah. So in Germany, this would be called a Schwarzbier or a black lager. So black beer is a very common term used across the globe as far as a style of beer. I just think these guys do a really good job on a nice roast, thin body, and it didn't really change a lot as it warmed up. That's what I appreciated. And these are tall boys, and I mean, I kind of plowed through mine faster than I should have because I was like, I like this beer.
I'm still nursing the tail end of mine.
But
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can't
yeah.
blame you,
So-
Dan. It was really tasty.
So how is it now that you've had it open for almost 2 hours?
It's it's a little. I would use the word slightly more rustic.
Okay.
As it's warmed up,
like
It's,
Elwood's apartment.
well, like paying taxes to the Cook County assessor. No,
Yeah.
no. So I'd say it's probably a little bit better, a little more quaffable if it's cold, because the flavor opens up and becomes a little bit bigger as the beer warms up.
Yeah.
Which I mean, the can does advise you keep this
Yeah.
cold and drink fresh.
Yes.
Which I can see why, but it's still like if you like coffee roast and if you like that,
I sure do.
stout flavor. Like, hey, let it warm up to 55 degrees. You won't,
Tepid.
you won't hate it.
Leave it in the trunk of your car as you drive across Illinois.
There you go. All right, so Mr. Non-Hophead Brian over here, this had some roasty bitterness to it, but it wasn't really hoppy bitterness.
It was not hoppy. I enjoyed it a lot. It was very drinkable. I don't know if I'd say it goes well with the film.
I was debating that the whole time I was drinking it. I was thinking, I like
it's
it. I like the
enjoyable to watch, but this is such an exuberant film.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost looking for like a good time party beer.
Yes.
And
something-
I'm not exactly sure what that would be.
something lighter.
You want to be
more
you want to be in that
lagery.
audience as they throw beer bottles and cans at the band against
Yeah.
that chicken
Yeah,
wire.
some-
I want
something-
one like
I
that.
want
lights,
cheap redneck
yeah.
beer.
And when the poor waitress was out there having to like be on her hands and knees to pick up all these big broken bottles,
That
and
was
it's
such
just
a
like,
bummer shot to have her pick up
oh,
a single shard of glass. Like, why would you show this?
so sad.
Sucks.
They can't
yeah.
afford a broom, Blake.
That's true. They spend too much money on chicken wire.
But it was a good beer.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
was totally drinkable, and maybe it's not a big beer, and so it did not interfere with enjoying the film at all. And that was definitely something worthwhile.
Yeah, that was a bonus.
Brian, I love that you used the word exuberant to describe Blues Brothers because it is. And I'm thinking, like, this is a movie that begins and ends in prison, but it is exuberant.
Yeah,
It
it
is.
does. It's a nice little bookend.
It's all the time in life between the crappy parts. Is what this movie is.
Yeah. And there's many references to different jails and how the food was in different jails.
Actually, I just realized there was the one reference that's almost a rule of three. Maybe I'll have to check when that scene happens, but it might be at the halfway mark, which should be just begins with jail. Middle part, they talk about the food in jail and scene back in jail.
They were ordering food somewhere and they said,
It was
it's like
the four
oatmeal.
fried chicken. It was a soul food place.
Yeah.
They were swapping stories with Mad Dog Malone.
Yeah.
Mad something.
Yeah.
Great nicknames.
Yeah, I would agree. Not necessarily good
Yeah.
for the film. I mean, it didn't interfere in any way.
No.
It's simply bought because of the name Death and Taxes, because the movie, the
It's about-
whole premise is
They gotta get money
dismissing
back. Gotta pay
taxes.
taxes.
Yeah.
it's about the taxes. And if you don't, the penguin's probably going to kill you.
And then float back through her
And
office
float
door.
back.
Well,
or
yeah.
go to those places she has to be
She would have to go to Latin America or
Yeah.
Sub-Saharan or I forget, Korea is the last
Korea,
place.
yeah.
Yeah, with the weight of Korea.
Right.
But then the second beer, named after one of the fun improvs in this film.
Yes, John Candy's line, Orange Whip. You want an Orange Whip? Orange Whip, Orange Whip.
And,
So,
the can captures his beautiful rotund face perfectly. His cherubic face with the sunglasses. His curly hair on his covering his bangs.
And also like
his
Fort
cop
Vancouver
glasses.
and reflected in his cop glasses.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed.
Oh
Yes.
no, I didn't.
I think
love
that was a new update. They've updated the label a couple of times, and I think that was one of the updates. Like they got a designer to actually do that. It used to just be like a hole or like so it was a silver can, and they would just like there wouldn't be any label there, so it would
nice.
just reflect back at you. But I think they figured out how to do that because that's just a foil imprint on the sticker.
That's very cool.
They in-house cans, so these are hand labeled. Well, they have a labeling machine, but still, I mean, it's done by hand, not a big machine.
Right.
Who wants an orange whip? No fruit was harmed in the making of this juicy IPA. In fact, there's no juice in this IPA. Rather, it's a legit IPA that benefits from heaps of Eldorado and Mosaic hops, which gives it a juicy and succulent aroma of orange, tangerine, and grapefruit. We think this IPA
Predicates
predicates
juiciness.
juiciness. Man, that all right,
Rawhide.
Yeah.
right? Yeah, that was not.
And if you don't know, you don't know.
If you don't know, you know.
This is a very hoppy IPA. So this is a New England style, 5.9%, 60 IBU. This beer put this brewery, which was a smaller brewery, this was like a year or two after they opened up. They came out with this recipe just when like New England juicies were starting to kind of get popular. And they were like, damn, this is a good beer.
It's a beer that'll sneak up on you. When I first started being in this area and hanging out with Dan, he'd get a commercial keg on tap for his house. I go, oh, this is so tasty. It's so tasty. Well, I have to sleep here now.
Yeah. It's,
Whoops.
It's officially an IPA. Shouldn't be called an IPA if it's below 6%, but 5.9 is close enough.
They call this a hazy IPA.
Yes. Well, hazy,
refers to how it looks, the visual of the beer.
The style of IPA means it's hazy, meaning it's going to be hazy in color. Now, you
can't see
can
through
find clear hazy beers, which blows me away. It's just the term hazy refers to the types of hops to expect in it and the flavor profile of pineapple or orange or citrus, juicy, pithy, super dry.
See, I always thought it was hazy because when they poured, once it was brewed and poured, you can't see through. It's an opaque beer.
Yes, correct. But there are people who have made non-hazy IPAs.
Gotcha.
And it's just like they just want to push the buttons and be like, well, it doesn't have to be like that.
or beardo?
Weirdos.
Well, they're beardo weirdos.
They are.
We're all beardos. We all got beards and we're weird.
So, I mean, Blake and I were just at the brewery yesterday, and we told them that, hey, we are here to talk about this wonderful beer and this wonderful movie. And the guy serving us, he was like a little surprised. I don't think he knew the story completely of why it was called Orange Whip, or that it's actually his face with the sunglasses he wears in the movie.
I'm a newer guy.
And he was pleasantly surprised when we told him that. He was a younger guy.
Okay.
We talked about music a little bit, and then we were just, I was like, dude, you got to check out the movie and see like what the reference is from, or just YouTube it. I was like, dude, you just YouTube him saying Orange Whip, Orange Whip, Orange Whip, because it's just a phrase that is part of culture for a while.
For old
it's not
people
very popular now.
Yeah.
It's not very popular now, but back in the day, it was like people knew what that was because this is a funny movie and it carried over.
Right.
On draft, wonderful. In a can, again, buy it if it's been refrigerated. If this beer gets warmed up because it's not very big in alcohol, you're going to have some issues. You could have issues with the flavor profile being off a little bit. This does express a lot of juicy flavor, very dry. The bitterness, though, isn't like smack you over the head strong bitter like some beers we've had recently are like super over the top on the level of acid that they have.
Yeah.
This one, not so bad. 60 IBUs, kind of middle of the road for an IPA. So,
how was it in the can? Because I just out of instinct poured mine into my glass and drank from it like
fine.
I always do. But I have a can.
I think it's a little. I think because it doesn't open up as fast.
Oh yeah.
This beer I think opens up and gets a little more rounded as it warms up, and if you're in a glass, it's going to do that a lot more faster because the gas exchange and it's going to flatten, and that's where you get the rounded flavor. Versus if it's got a lot of bubbles and it's going to be really effervescent on the tongue and bounce around, and it's like it's a really sharp IPA. This isn't as sharp. I like it when it's a little bit warmed up and, it's rounded to me. I don't know. You guys, it looks like there's some deep thoughts going on here. People are like, I'm going to disagree.
Deep thoughts on one side, and the other, there's just a record just ran on music. I won't say who.
Why are you looking at me?
We're looking at you. We're looking at you.
I'm going to talk about my experience.
We'll talk about your experience.
Let's go in opposite order.
No, I tasted a lot of tangerine and orange up front, which I actually wasn't expecting, because when I've had it on tap, I don't taste that as much, and I really enjoyed that. And then I did not enjoy as much the the hops on the back, but that's just my thing.
Everyone's allowed.
Brian,
Everyone's allowed
I
that
agree.
opinion.
Like tangerine and orange. I think as it got warmer, I got more of that grapefruit type profile. But yeah, it was very, very fruity, very juicy. Definitely, it's. I mean, after just a black lager, there's a lot more hops going on in this one. And for an IPA, it's not extreme, but
No, it's not.
it's also that's like to
it was,
preface
it was
why-
drinkable,
yeah.
and I would say that though I didn't enjoy it as much as the first beer, it matched the film better.
I
for
agree.
sure.
I agree.
And that's because it's like it's very present in your profile and in what you're tasting. You're going to be like, oh yeah, there's something going on.
And it's like
activity,
a
yeah.
fun time
Yeah,
vacation beer
it's like people say candy or it
candy?
has yes and yes. there's an amount of I want to say playfulness in the way that this beer tastes. If that's an appropriate way to phrase it.
It makes you think of John Candy, which seems perfect. Like
Yeah.
this feels like if he brewed beer, this is the kind of beer he would want to brew.
Yes.
The name Orange Whip is appropriate for this beer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite beers.
And who knows if they came up with a recipe and tried it and they're like, well, now we got to name it. Or they had the idea and then tried to formulate something based on that idea.
I like to think, and this is just pure speculation, that they had the beer, it was brewed, they're thinking, well, we'll figure out a name in the morning. Let's watch a movie. And they just put on this movie. And as the scene comes up, they jump up and go, Jesus Christ, that's the best name ever.
Yeah.
And then the light.
And then the nun hits him with a big
Big yardstick till it breaks.
But then there's a
geez.
stream of sunlight that comes through
Exactly.
the upper window and it illuminates
bathed in
one.
orange light. And then the penguin just keeps smacking him. And also the good old boys are there for some reason.
Yeah. All right. Thumbs up on this beer. Thumbs up on the second beer, but not necessarily for the movie.
No, I think
I
the
feel
Orange
like-
Whip matches the movie better.
I feel like it
prefer-
matched better.
I prefer
agree.
Death and Taxes, like as to just drink
As
a
a
beer,
drinking
but I
beer,
think Orange
yeah.
Whip matched the movie a little bit better.
I agree.
All righty. Any other thoughts on this?
This movie's amazing. These beers are great. I love hanging out with you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of fun to watch this film with friends.
Great
Agreed.
group movie.
And so if you can find Orange Whip, I would suggest if you're going to watch this up here in the Pacific Northwest, it gets distributed not really widely outside of the Portland, Vancouver market, but it is around.
If you're outside of that market, another juicy IPA,
Yeah, maybe.
Either that or maybe a lager if you want something lighter to match the.
Yeah,
because these boys aren't drinking craft.
No, there is a lot
Can't afford to
of
drink craft
beer
beer.
signs. And they play in a hockey tonk bar.
Musicians can't afford to drink craft beer.
Yeah, the top of the PA system had a whole line of cans and bottles on it, and I was trying to figure out it looked like a Heineken
Oh,
bottle.
I missed
and
that.
I know there was somebody was drinking Miller Lite at one point,
Oh, yeah.
and it's just like
I'm sure there were
you know,
Budweisers being hurled at them
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
honky tonk. Yeah.
There was a big neon Bud sign.
Oh, that's right.
It didn't even say
Forgot
Bud
about that.
Light. It was just Bud.
Bud.
So
That's for
American
you.
adjunct lager is what.
Yes,
There you go.
Find some cheap American beer and have a good time.
Yeah.
And we did hydrate a little bit. I made sure. I mean, like I
did pretty good.
So the
We
thing
did.
was, is
There's water on the table,
We had gone,
and I saw it.
so one of the things that we haven't done
Very osmosis.
very
We'll get
many
some of it.
times was we actually ate something at the beginning of this film that went pretty well with this Death and Taxes coffee-ish beer.
I'm saving mine for a home.
And well, those of us that did enjoy it, we had these really interesting, I guess you'd call them cinnamon rolls.
They're cinnamon rolls.
Cinnamon rolls. And we had gone to lunch and we grabbed some of those from a store that was over on Alberta. And I was like, I know that we have this coffee beer and I think this would be a good combination because it's a little sweet. And my pairing went really well. I mean, I know that you guys had mentioned surprisingly, this is, it's kind of like drinking a cold brew coffee with something really kind of sweet.
Sugar goes with beer. Who would have guessed?
Yeah.
The coffee I had, just the hot drip coffee, kind of went with the beginning of the movie. Just a classic drip coffee seems to match the prison scene and just the 80s vibe of, get some at the gas station and smoke a cigarette.
Yeah, and then flick your cigarette out after you just drive off and it
blow up the
blows
gas
up.
station.
I'm like, seriously, they just blow up a lot of stuff without reason.
no
Three things got
consequences.
blown up. That shop next to the
They're on a
men's
mission from
hotel.
God.
They're on a mission from God.
We
We got sunglasses. We got 100 miles to go, half a tank of gas. Got sunglasses on at night and half a pack of cigarettes. Let's go.
Is that comedic effect of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they just blew up this petrol station? Or is it
Yeah.
like the chaos that surrounds them constantly and they're just so inured to it?
They're
so
oblivious.
That
They're
might be
oblivious.
it. Like, yeah, of course the gas station blew up. That just happens when you go on tour.
That's
What?
right. Right, yeah.
Jake, what are you talking about? I don't know, man. Lead backflip down this church.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, hydrate, get some water. Because if you don't,
hydrate, you're going to dehydrate. I was trying to think of a way to do it the way Elwood opens the that song they do towards the end. I'm blanking on the names of these songs.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you to the Palace Hotel. We're glad to have you here tonight. Oh, well, now you distracted me with the music.
All right, Dan, cut that. We'll start it. Now
I don't know what to say. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Palace Hotel. We're glad to have you here. We've got the Blues Brothers Band here back. Cab Calloway opening up. And first, make sure you hydrate. Otherwise, you'll dehydrate all through the set.
That was beautiful, Aaron.
yeah, it was good.
Good job.
Aaron,
Hey.
Dan will put some producer magic on this. It's going to sound beautiful. He's going to cut him and Brian's parts on just for the actual soundtrack.
I believe in Dan.
He's going to hit the make good button.
It works that way. Hey, so I think we made good with this episode.
It's a great
thanks
episode.
for hanging out, listening, and as always, the opinions expressed during the taping of this are those of the hosts. And find some good beers, hang out, watch this with your kids if they're old enough, because it actually will educate them about the music from that era.
Yeah.
This is Aaron. Until next time, just think just a little bit. Think just a little bit.
This is Blake taking Brian's bit from the beginning and telling you to hidey, 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 ho.
And this is Brian. Thanks for listening. Bye.
All right. Take care, everybody.
The whole rhythm section was purple gang, let's rock.